Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
DanQ,
Makahlua,
Imran Siddiqui,
TheMeInTeam,
with guest co-hosts
Lars Domus,
Rolo 1.
Mackie told me yes too. She communicated that to me telepathically.
Whoa, that's kind of like that whole invisible women thing. That so many things can go wrong.
But so many things can go oh so right.
What are you talking about? You can't even see it.
But you see, we're telepathically linked, so even though she's invisible... see, I have an advantage, so I like this idea.
Then you're just back to square one.
Keep dreaming, Dan. Keep dreaming.
The 82nd episode, and it's my pleasure to introduce your host, the illustrious DanQ.
Do you have your Civ face on?
His regular co-hosts, Makahlua,
Brought to you by the Pepper.
Imran Siddiqui,
hello,
and TheMeInTeam.
Now streaming Humiliation live.
And they're joined by guest co-hosts, Rolo 1,
Hi, people.
and I am Lars Domus.
In forum talk, zones of control. Should it return to civilization? In the research lab, the call for different types of satellites. In the Senate, on commando gunships and the quote-unquote Meatgrinder. And under the Miscellaneous heading, a live streaming for CivIV games by TheMeInTeam.
This is Forum Talk, where we investigate hot Civ issues in the forums.
Zone of control. Should it be back? Well, the topic is a little bit how it started in July 16 of 2007. That is pretty much necromancy. Warcraft started saying that more self-respecting turn-based games have zone of control implemented in one form or another. Do you think it should be brought back to Civ? I'm pretty sure both Civ 1 and 2 had it, and I think there was some form of it in Civ 3. That is pretty much true. I don't quite understand why that particular feature was removed from Civ 4. I can only assume it was to dumb down the movement, make it more intuitive. Well, that is pretty much discussable. I personally would like to see it back. It would add another way of strategy, making wars more interesting. You would no longer be able to simply bypass a simple defender on a hill, for example. It would make forts more relevant as well. I should remind that this post is from 2007. There is even a co-host here that simply didn't play Civ 4 in that time.
That's correct. I joined January 08. I did not realize this was a necromancy because somebody responded to it pretty late. And sometimes these topics go crazy. And once you mentioned the necromancy and I checked the date, I'm like, oh, wow.
I would just like to remind that this thread is because it is from 2007. When it refers to forts, it is not referring to Beyond the Sword forts, but to vanilla and Warwords forts that were a little bit less useful than Beyond the Sword forts are. But I agree with what Phil says in the last page or something like that, that if we had zone of control in Civ 4, it would give a tremendous advantage to the defender. To say the truth, I don't know any game that has retarded movement for the attacker and zone of control. Even, I'm going to advertise a little, even Empire Total War that come out recently has zone of control, but when in war, you don't have any penalty of movement in foreign lands. Bringing that to C4, in my opinion, is pretty much forcing the attacker to go or against bad terrain or against strong unit fortified somewhere.
Listeners, just to clarify, Phil and TheMeInTeam are synonymous here. To add to my point, the main thing with the limited movement in enemy territory in Civ 4 is that it opens up the attacker to collateral, basically whenever the defender feels like hitting them with collateral, as long as they have roads. Zone of control, one of the best strategies the attacker can follow if he's not using two move units is to stick to defensive terrain, which now the defender could sit on, and you couldn't even bypass it. You'd have to attack it there. Or the defender could just opt to attack you directly with collateral. which it already does. It just adds another layer of defense to the side of the war that's already very strongly favored in Civ 4. I believe that that's the actual reason it was removed, not to dumb down the movement, because actually the movement can be pretty difficult now when you leave yourself vulnerable.
Well, I'm not quite so refined in strategy games, so I'm just happy the zone of control is gone because it was infuriating in the old games.
No. Oh, really?
Trying to figure out where you could not move the units.
You could not move the units. Like William says about C4, one of his strategy ideas was pretty much one unit after the other, and his attacker could simply not find a way to attack.
Oh, would the AI try to go around zones of control? Could you make a maze or something? That'd be hilarious. It'd be like playing tower defense in Civ or something. Not exactly the intention of the game, but it'd be pretty funny. Especially with Civ 3C, just bombard them while they're running through your maze, and at the end they're all redlined.
We already have a maze script, we don't need to make more mazes.
I think a lot of the complaints about zone of control in earlier Civs was the fact that it did not just apply to enemy units.
I'd forgotten about that too. That could be really annoying, you're right.
So Lord Rawl, who started this thread more than 2 years ago, made it clear that he was saying that this would only apply to enemy units. And I was going through the arguments either in favor of zone of control returning. Some people were fine with the way it was before. Some people wanted it tweaked as a feature. Some people did not want it in there as a feature. And one of the things Lord Rawl said is, in conclusion to his opening post, there could also be promotions or inherent abilities that would allow them to ignore zones of control. I was thinking, rather than it being a feature in the game, make it a promotion ability. So rather than an inherent unit ability that would allow them to ignore zones of control, that would allow them to actually exercise a zone of control. With the Commando promotion, you can use enemy roads and railroads. There is only one Commando promotion right now. Why not have Zone of Control a Commando 2 promotion ability, where Commando itself requires combat for and the military science technology, and does not apply to archery units, only recon, artillery, mounted, melee, gunpowder, and armored. The only thing that I think would need to be tweaked if we did that is I'm not so certain about a recon unit being able to exercise a Zone of Control. But this way, I think it would allow us to get around the fact that it would be either in or not in, and then that way, if someone really wanted to be able to exercise that, then they would have to go down the combat promotion path quite considerably to make a direct effort for that. And in that respect, it would have limited applications in the game because of how long it would take you, and it would take you to, if not the mid, maybe even the later point in the game when it wouldn't be quite so, how shall we say, devastating to combat.
Well, if you wanted the Commando 2 promotion, that would be something like 40-something experience points, right?
Yes, the reason you don't see a lot of Commando currently is for just that reason. It costs so much experience to get it that you can't really make it practical by getting enough units.
I see a lot of Commando promotions. I use a lot of spies.
Yes.
But maybe that is true. A Commando 2 promotion would need, even with charismatic leaders, it would be a bucketload of experience points needed to get there. It would be probably interesting for always war games, because in that games units get completely stupid amounts of experience points. But in a normal game, yes, it would be quite complicated to get that promotion in a usable time, at least maybe until the time of tanks, and when tanks come by, probably Zone of Control would be pretty much useless. Not sure if I would like that much of an idea, but it would be interesting to see if we could pull that out in a sensible way.
I suppose you could make it even an ability with the first Commando, but I know, as you're saying, it would take a while to get there. When we're thinking about zones of control and how it's been implemented before, just how much terrain a zone of control could apply for, the fact that it would come later in the game would, as I said, wouldn't be quite so devastating, because you would have, or at least hopefully would have, a more diversified army with different types and a larger army. And so if you really want to go down that path, then it's kind of a reward because the zone of control can be quite powerful. So if you are able to get to the point where you can get to the commando promotion, then that's another ability. And perhaps for those people who say, well, I don't see a lot, and I haven't either, and perhaps there's another reason to try to get to commando if that's something that you really want to exercise.
It would be another tool in the box, but it would probably need a lot of tweaking to be competitive approach to the game. Like I said one time, every time that someone says that thinking is impossible to Civ 1 year after someone proves that otherwise.
Even if we was decided that Commando was too late, you could even have it a little farther down the combat line. Obviously not Combat 1 or something, maybe Combat 3 or 4.
Yeah, Combat 4 would be a good idea. Remember that Commando comes with Combat 5, isn't it?
Yeah, it's after your 4th combat promotion is when Commando becomes available.
And having the military science tech.
Yes. Pretty much the only way you'd get it before that anyway is a great general, though.
Well, I was about to say. I was just trying to find a way to have it in the game. I was seeing both sides of the argument in terms of being a feature and the argument about how cultural borders right now really impact that in part, and comments that some other people are saying, I think you, Phil, about that. You just simply couldn't add zone of control in how Civ 4 is now, because it would just unnecessarily complicate things and make it even more of a defender advantage. I figured that this might be a way, again, to have it as an ability rather than a feature, so it's still in the game, but it has limited usefulness in terms of get there, but once you get there, it could be considerably powerful.
Yes, but like I said, it would be hard to pull out, not be either overpowering or underpowered. Having a feature just because you have a feature is a little bit fluff.
And this way it becomes more ability than a feature. Playtesting still required, but not quite as extensively as if you say it's in the game from the outset, and then here are the rules, which can get quite complicated. Because it seemed like to me, in order to try to make it balanced, not being too overpowered or underpowered, it was going to become too complicated. And then, as we've said before, we're going to need a spreadsheet in order to keep track of whether or not that this is balanced or not.
Yeah, right. You have a point in there.
There was a link to an article on Gamma Sutra, an interview with Sid Meier, and he was asked if one thing you could change about the original Civilization, what would it be? And he said zones of control. Quote, looking at it today, I might try to streamline the game a little bit more and make the rules not quite as detailed or obscure than some of them were in the original game, unquote.
Well, Civ 4, it still has a lot of obscure rules.
No, don't get me started on some of those.
Rather than adding one back in, there were some interesting ideas in here, such as that they should apply to forts, and you should be able to build forts outside your cultural borders, giving promotions, as I said, to units to be able to negate that possibility. Oh, that's a good idea, but then kind of the one step forward was two steps back, either because of a complication factor or the fact that the foundation it was built upon was already in and of itself complicated, so we really were treating a symptom of the problem rather than the problem itself. So this way I just avoid the problem of you're not asking the question, should zone of control be a feature? Or rather, how do we make zone of control a feature? No, it's not a feature, it's simply an ability.
It could pull out in that way, but I still have some bittersweet feelings about having zone of control in the game. It's just a thing of mine.
It certainly is a tactical monster.
Well, I still remember the times that I played Alpha Centauri, and that has a pretty strong zone of control that you can only bypass with the promotion. Well, what would be in Civ 4 promotion? Alpha Centauri has a completely different way of dealing with things. It had an ability that you can add to the units that was a cloaking device that allowed to bypass the zone of control, but it was pretty much like Civ 2 was. Zone of control was reign and absolute, and the only way you can pass that was the cloaking device that would be pretty much similar to what you are proposing. Kill the unit or orbital insertion, that was pretty much like the paratroopers in Beyond the Sword. I am afraid that it can be either too strong or either too weak, or too strong and too weak at the same time. It can happen.
Yeah, that actually happens more than people would think. It happens anytime something is almost impossible to get, but when you get it, it just breaks the game. Those are examples of things that are too strong and too weak at the same time.
I didn't actually play that much of Alpha Centauri. How accessible was that to the player? Was that a technology or ability? Would it be as much effort
It was an ability that came with a tech somewhere in the middle of the game.
Whoa, and that applied to any unit?
You could apply it to any unit. It had an extra cost to build the units. It was like an extra. Alpha Centauri has a system of can add or remove things of a unit. You can customize the units, pay more or less for the unit you build. The cloaking device was an ability. That's why I'm comparing what Dan was proposing in here. It was something that you can add to any units as long as you had the tech and you were in the mood to pay the extra price for it. It was not very expensive, if I recall correctly. In certain aspects, it was at the same time weaker and stronger than what Dan is proposing, because you could add to any unit, but it was not exactly as expensive as getting the 30 experience point promotion like you could have in Civ 4.
I played it, but I was young when I played it, and I don't remember a whole lot. It's been over 10 years.
I still play it from time to time. That is why it came to my mind.
Takes us to the end of the control of zones of this conversation.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
Whoa, that was a joke?
yeah, but it was pretty bad, so that's why the was kind
Yeah, that's what triggered me to realize that it was a joke, though. Before that, I didn't know.
You see, Phil, I took that joke and I applied the cloaking device to it.
Oh, I see. It blew right by me. I couldn't control it. Couldn't prevent it.
Come on into the research lab where we explore concepts that are not in Civ yet, but may be in the future.
Colonel wants to have satellites in the game to allow you to do things extra. Like recon satellite, an economy satellite, which boosts your economy because it would boost cell phone signals, military satellite to shoot down missiles, and an attack satellite, which is like a laser weapon.
Actually, satellites is one of the last techs I researched in the space race. If I go for the internet idea, then you go like genetics, then fusion, and then finally you loop back around because AI likes to tech satellites fairly early. So there's a good chance you can get it off the internet and beat them because they're essentially researching tech for you. So even there, some of us don't go satellites immediately.
I don't go satellites immediately.
The suggestion of the economy satellite, no control over this, would just boost the economy slightly to signify cell phones and such and how it creates a new market. I'm sorry, so what's the gameplay? Pretty cerebral answer though. That's too deep for me, man. I don't know.
Maybe you want like plus 5% gold per city or another trade route or something.
There you go. Maybe we should have satellites that would attack other people's spaceships.
Oh.
That would be delicious, because that's one of the ways the AI beats me the most frequently.
No, it is me or this is going Alpha Centauri again. I'm reading the topic and what I'm seeing is it's the types of satellites we had in Alpha Centauri. The ones that gave energy, the ones that gave minerals, the ones that gave food, and the ones that knocked the other satellites down.
There's a question, yeah, how long of gameplay are they suggesting? Alright, I just had a new satellite in the year 3000. Like, alright, guys.
And you know, some of those ridiculously good players have access to satellites around 1400 AD, so it may or may not be before the end of the game.
Yeah, then you tell them, listen, just win the damn game.
With all the stuff you have to build in the modern era anyway, you wouldn't have time for the satellites. There's lots of different military units, you have to manage corporations, and if you're going for the space race, all your production will be tied up in the spaceship.
I do like Anti-Logic's suggestion in the thread. It's basically like he likes the idea of a recon satellite, but maybe it's a national wonder, which would remove the fog of war. But on that hand, I wonder if that would make warfare a bit too easy.
Nah. What you already have now is air recon, and prior to a war, with almost every case when you're playing against AI anyway, you can just base like 3 or 4 fighters throughout their empire and reveal the whole damn thing at the start of the war. Know exactly where their best units are, where they hold the most of their units, and everything else you could possibly want to know about their military unit locations. And you can get that with physics, not satellites, already. So, to an extent, that would be mildly redundant. I mean, it would be useful to see them every single turn in the squares that you couldn't just perform air recon on anyway. but it would hardly be game-breaking compared to what you already have access to, between espionage and the ability to perform air recon very early in the game compared to satellites.
Well, it would be probably too strong indeed. If we want to say it, even satellites as it is, with their removal of black fog of the game, is probably too strong in some situations. Satellites remove black fog of the map.
Yes, I know that, but usually you traded for the full view of it before you get there. Can usually get the entire world map off the AI in standard map trades. Satellites usually doesn't bring a whole lot, other than I guess you don't have to trade for new maps for 5 gold to get an update on how it looks.
True. But really, removing all the fog with the recon satellite would be either too strong if we were playing against someone that knows how to play the game. That will pretty much exclude secure AI. Unfortunately, it's true. But
Well, it wouldn't help the AI at all.
well, you can apply that to some humans as well, but
Well, that's true. I don't see too many human versus human games that get the satellites, though, generally.
well, I've seen one recently. It was in fact the only game of humans against humans that I really saw ending in a space race, but it was because 5 people decided to cooperate to do the ship. But in the end, it still had some nuclear fireworks, but
In this thread, Civ My Way talked about, I'm planning on implementing satellites in my game. First you have to have the prerequisite technologies, and then you must build a launch site, which is a costly tile improvement, and then each satellite launch is costly. No, I don't like the idea of it being a tile improvement, whether it's costly or cheap. The suggestion by Connell, who started the thread, about the military satellite. First, remove the SDI Wonder. Instead, have multiple military satellites that can shoot down missiles, and you can pick the area that they protect. The more of these in one area, the more likely they are to shoot down missiles. I could see having satellites being, as a city improvement, the SDI Wonder. If you get to that point in the game, overpowered.
quoting a beta tester, Solver, the original idea was to put it with 50% of interception, not 75, but by some godforsaken reason, it came with 75 interception ability.
Yeah, so rather than having that be a project that you can build, have satellite be a city improvement. So then that way, if you really want to be protecting all of your cities from satellites, then you're going to have to build that city improvement in all of the cities. But probably there are only particular cities or some particular cities that you're that concerned about. And if they're the cities that you're that concerned about, they're probably sufficient enough in production one way or another that they can build those within a reasonable amount of time.
Now, would you suggest a 100% interception rate on those cities that build it, though?
No, I would not.
Alright, just checking.
No, 150%. They, in fact, have the chance to not only intercept the satellite, but turn it right around and have them smack dab into the city that launched them.
What would happen if the 2 people had SDIs with the one?
Game crash, sloop.
Promotion for the other units. Military units can gain experience and receive promotions. I was thinking, what about promotions for the other units? Spies, workers, and settlers. What kind of promotions could they earn and how would they gain experience? For spies, it's easy. For workers, and especially settlers, there is no reasonable way they could gain experience, quote-unquote. Now, back in episode 32, which was recorded and released 2 years ago, talked about spy promotions. But here we're looking at promotions for spies as well as settlers and workers. I'm going to jump to the settlers and workers part. Rather than promotions, workers and settlers acquire skills. Skills are dependent upon technological discoveries. Newly trained workers and settlers gain all available skills. Like, for example, navigation available with compass. Workers, and I guess I assume settlers too, can enter forest and jungle without losing movement. Or with outfitting available at math, they can enter hills without losing movement. Or my favorite, planning available with writing +1 road movement.
That's basically the only one that would be really helpful other than the one that comes with guilds. Well, I guess provisioning would be okay. But a lot of these are pretty much moot because by the time you get them, you'll have your city settled already. You'll have a lot of your improvements done or you've already started chopping. I guess outfitting could be okay too. Outfitting and navigation.
The provisioning one, settlers can found cities half filled with grain.
Overpower. No.
How many cities are you founding after Calendar, typically? It's only going to be a couple per game in normal games. I mean, I guess in some games like Terra it would be pretty significant, but it'd be hard to say it's overpowered because everybody would have it.
There is a thing called advanced starts, you know.
I would just like to see something available sooner if we're going to give it to them. Because only a couple of these seem like they'd have any impact on the game, typically.
Nah, see, I don't think we should give it to them, so that's why I like when these are right now.
Well, I agree, too. Other than the complete elimination of barb animals, rather than getting defense in 1 and 2, just wipe out barb animals, please. That would solve a lot more. And we wouldn't have to wait for ironworking and feudalism, and we wouldn't have to watch military units get mauled by, like, Golden Compass armored bears anymore.
That was very good acting there, Phil. You were really getting into the role as if that had happened to you or something.
It's weird, isn't it? I don't know.
The one that was just way too complicated was Counter-Espionage 4. Maybe just because of the details, but also this turn spy is visible. 25% to turn a spy, so I guess turn a spy to be visible. And then got really complicated after that.
Didn't you just make turn spy take the enemy spy and make it yours, like you captured a worker, except for you captured a spy? It sounds a lot simpler to me.
There you go.
None of this stuff looks too overpowered. I wouldn't mind seeing it. You just gain experience based on doing missions. Because even with mission success, you would need a lot of experience to get all these promotions, of course. Even if you were to improve just mission success or just infiltration, you would still have a good chance of being caught, especially if they run counter-espionage and stick a spy on that tile or have security bureau. And on top of that, there would be some strategy element as to which promotions you'd want to take, depending on how much espionage you have invested in what you're trying to do. So, I actually like the idea of promotions on spies, and I believe the older Civ games had a form of that based on successfully pulling off a mission. Like, your spy would be more likely to succeed in future attempts, less likely to get caught.
Based on what you just said, thank you also for supporting my zone of control promotion argument. I appreciate that.
I never said that.
By the same logic, ha-ha, I win. Right? Because of all the effort that you have to go to, the strategy involved to get there, then it would not be too overpowered.
Your zone of control logic still... Well, the things that bother me about your zone of control logic is calling something an ability versus a feature, as if there's technically a difference. The fact that it would still be very difficult to see a lot of use out of it, but we left that in the past, so...
Yeah, there's a difference between it being an ability and a feature is in the promotion field. But yeah, fine, we left that in the past.
One thing I like about the idea of having promotions to spies is that it would make the individual spy unit more valuable. Right now it's like, so what if my spy was caught? It would just mean that the rival Civ would still be annoyed at me, just a little bit more than usual. But if it was a spy that had a lot of promotions, it would actually mean something.
It's true. Everyone does like losing high promotion units. It's a good thought. It does add some value to what's currently a throwaway unit, really. The only thing that takes more of a throwaway role than a spy right now is Siege.
Welcome to the Senate, where we discuss game strategy. Commando gunships. I've never actually had a commando gunship, but I think it would probably work great.
Yeah, it can. The problem is getting one. This thread was started by Tessabar or Tekabar. I'm not sure which is the pronunciation.
I'm going to go with Tessabar.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Basically says gunships can upgrade from cavalry to get the commando, as we just mentioned. And they just go into enemy land, pillage, and return to safety. And what he's saying is there seems to be no stop to it. And he said, of course, the AI will never have access to that, just imagining a multiplayer game. Yeah, I have a number of thoughts on this. First of all, again, we're talking about advanced flight in a multiplayer game where we're upgrading cavalry that existed from an earlier war to gunships, so this is already somewhat rare. If you start in this era, you're not going to have access to it. And if you started earlier, those cavalry were seeing war, there's a good chance that the game was already decided. But if you put all those things aside, there are some options that really hose the commando gunships. For example, if you're playing multiplayer, probably playing simultaneous turns, so I suggested abuse of SAM infantry or mobile SAMs to just clip them while they're in there. But if you don't want to do that, you can just sit your surface-to-air missiles, or your mobile ones, on whatever tiles you're worried about being pillaged. You can simply attack the enemy. Good as they are in your territory, they're nothing special in their territory. If you're capturing their cities, the most that gunship can do is try to stop you. It's not going to be pillaging anymore since you killed it, or they left it outside the city when you took their city. I'm not sure which they'd decide on. Either way, this is a fairly rare thing, and there are a number of looks to stop it, and some other people suggested destroying roads and rails near the border.
I suggested something similar in the thread. Funnel the roads. Commando is a promotion that uses without roads or without railroads. If you only have roads leading to a death trap, Commando gunships are basically useless.
That's true. Who builds just a line of roads next to the enemy territory anyway? I'm always a little bit nervous if I'm next to a human player about getting my workers near them anyway. I don't want to spend as few turns building roads next to them as possible, no matter what point in the game it is, because humans don't have many qualms about just stealing your workers if you put them there. That's a very good point, and then you would just have your SAMs on those tiles. Pretty difficult for the gunship to do anything of significance, because it would have to go through your SAM or around your SAM, and then use up its movement points and become vulnerable. Maybe even to the SAM itself, but possibly to other things as well.
Pretty much, but there are a lot of suggestions in that thread that could work. The most fun one would be probably use your own Commando gunships, but...
Yeah.
Oh, and then there was the obligatory use nukes suggestion.
That is not the solution to everything.
Hey, it absolutely would work.
Yes, why use a hammer when a sledgehammer would do, right?
That reminds me someone. Right, Phil?
Yeah, well, it's exactly what I did. It works. I can vouch for it. And not only that, you get nukes sooner than gunships typically, so there you go. You have your counter. And hey, nukes even destroy those pesky roads, so they can't even use their roads to get to you.
And with Fallout, that also slows down.
Yeah, it hampers movement. It's ideal. Just like against anything else. Which is the third post in the thread. From a deity player, actually, is the one that told him to do that, so you know it must be a good idea then.
Tessibar has a follow-up post further down the thread where he's saying, "In my imaginary nightmare, enemy base is on a forest hill fort right next to my border with 3 workers ready to build a railroad, and of course stationed with a ton of defenders. Enemy gunships pillage my land and return to base. My SAMs can never reach them. My invading force lost all siege from flanking damage and suffers from collateratory damage. Nukes are banned. How could I wake up from that nightmare?" I imagine this guy lying in his bed at night and flailing his arms and shouting, the Commando gunship.
And if he pictures me with the gunships, that would have a special place in my heart.
I have an answer for his nightmare. Who used siege in times of gunships? There is a thing called planes, you know.
Yeah, not to mention you can't really flank units that are in cities. If he's on your border, hell. You could probably get there with mobile artillery anyway. But yeah, who does use siege then? I do on very rare occasions. They go with mech infantry, mobile artillery or something, but not usually.
At least planes have the bonus of not getting flanked by gunships.
That's true.
That would be extremely weird, to say the truth.
But it's pretty hard to attack mobile SAMs anyway with gunships. Yeah, they'd get withdraws, but it starts getting costly to attack mobile SAMs with gunships.
It's easy to attack them. It's hard to get them back alive.
Yes. You're always correcting these technicalities. You know what I meant.
Technicalities are in the core of the game, you know.
Oh, yeah, you can attack modern armor with warriors pretty easily. Clearly.
It could be a bad day if you fall into the Meatgrinder, and then the language that you choose could be R-rated 2 times over, once while it's happening, and then a second time when you realize that you fell into the Meatgrinder.
And the third time when he tells about it.
Not to be confused with meat shields in Gears of War or meat you pick up in games that heal you. Vormir here saying is that he likes to, or he's thinking about leaving a city with an almost dead AI and letting it reproduce units to stock so he can keep killing them and farming experience. That's what he's referring to as a meat grinder. and he's asking if anyone else does this or if it's a good idea or not, essentially.
Yes, it depends on how long the war you've been fighting has been going on, because that would just keep your war weariness increasing. Not quickly, but you couldn't do it indefinitely.
You also do run into some of the deploy mechanic problems. Another complicated things in Civ 4 that people don't know about, the AI's likelihood to declare a backstab war on you versus a total war. There's a lot of AIs that are much more apt to declare on you if you're already at war. Well, pretty much all of them are, but some of them that you wouldn't expect. For example, De Gaulle and Elizabeth are AIs that will enjoy dogpiling when they wouldn't normally declare, for example.
So yeah, they're being cautious of what other civs you have met and are in the game, and their ability to get to you, and just how powerful they happen to be. Because it's possible you could be dogpiled, war of opportunity, but not being in a position to really do much damage other than being annoying.
You also run the risk of the AI vassailing, the target offering himself as a vassal to the AI. That also causes them to declare on you, and that's just a pain. I hate that.
Yeah.
You can buy 10 turns by requesting some gold off the AIs that could take them as a vassal, but that's only 10 turns. And then you have your normal war weariness concerns, and just the fact that if you capture the city, you can start using the city for other things rather than farming experience. My thoughts on this matter are, if you're not just trying to shred somebody's stack and they keep refilling it, just to kill them, just to break into their mainland, basically. If you're not doing that, then just try to unlock Heroic Epic, and once you've got Heroic Epic unlocked, just take the city. Like Ironon says, if you're in a medieval war, which I hate anyway on normal speed, but if you're in a medieval war and they're throwing a bunch of units in the city, you can just keep beating on those units with high city raider troops, specifically Trebs, and wear them down until you kill everything, and then you can go and take all the other cities quickly. That's a little bit different from saving the last AI city.
With giving a civ that you think might vassal this other civ that you're at war with regards to the gold in the 10 turns, if I'm following you correctly, could you not just do that once every 10 turns and then avoid that possibility?
No, because of the way the requests work. I think there's like a 5% chance per turn that they forget that you made a request. I'm not sure if there's a hard turn limit or not before it's even possible anymore. Then they have a 5% chance of forgetting after that. The second time they'll be like, sorry, but you pressed this too hard. That resets the counter, by the way, that you made a request again.
Oh.
So you can't avoid war indefinitely that way, but you can buy 10 turns typically. 2 exceptions. One is you get somebody who just refuses your demand, and sometimes the AI doesn't have any gold, and that just sucks. And you give them gold, and it doesn't make them have available gold, because they never display how much available gold they have. So if they're in financial trouble, they just won't trade you gold. There's nothing you can do. But Heroic Epic can be worth it, because it's just such a huge boost to your military production, especially at the point in the game when it becomes available.
You had mentioned about being humiliated, Phil, so it seems fitting that you explain to our audience how you will humiliate yourself and have been humiliating yourself.
Well, okay. Civ 4 Let's Plays on YouTube, I have a little bit of the ability to screen what actually shows up there. I don't cheat or anything, but if a game just botches to hell and it's going terrible, it might not make it on YouTube. But the thing about live streaming is, you don't have that option. There are people watching you as you're playing. So anything you do is basically on record. My very first game on live stream, part of me was just testing it, but I was trying to win. I was doing a game, and sure enough, the first AI I made is Shaka. It just has to be, right? I mean, come on. So I expand, and Shaka's conscious with both me and another AI, but he's closer to me, and I just know the war's probably going to come. And I'm playing as the Celts, and Shaka declares on me. I actually walled him into like 5 cities or something. I killed his initial invasion stack using Gallic warriors, and I killed another stack, and then another stack, and then I went on the offensive with Guerrilla 2 Gallic warriors, but he had like 8 units in the first city, so I couldn't take it, and then he shredded my stack. And then he just kept producing more and more units. He produced like hundreds of units by 500 AD. It was just stupid. Like, where the hell are these things coming from? And then while doing that, I must have killed like 70, 80 units. He starts hitting machinery, civil service, he's getting maces, and of course I can't tech because all I've been doing is building units. So eventually I got run down. Once he got Trebs, that was it. I was through. I'm not really sure what I could have done in that game to beat him. He just had enough land that he could spam units like crazy, and I didn't see a way to point him towards anybody else in time. And that happens with the warmongers who don't have favorite civics that could even get them to pleased, let alone friendly. So that game tanked, and then my next game tanked also. From there on, I started doing a little better. I had a run of like 3 or 4 games in a row that I won. So there's some good, there's some bad. But it seems like my viewers really don't mind either way. They like seeing me spectacularly fail and get pissed off, and a catapult war goes poorly, or something else goes wrong. Somebody declares on me instead of their worst enemy, who is at war with somebody else. And, you gotta take the bad with the good, I suppose.
Well, at least you can play fast enough to put that on a live stream. If it was me, people would leave about turn 10, 15.
Yeah, I think that's been my biggest advantage when trying to do these Let's Plays, and especially for live stream. Because with Let's Plays, people can do editing and still make something very presentable and worth watching. But there's only a handful of people who can really play sub-3-hour games consistently. So I just bump the thread now whenever I'm playing a game, and people who want to, that notice the time, can watch.
But it's also worth noting that the live stream, it's not just live stream. You can go to the on-demand tab and watch your past live streams.
That's correct, so you can see any screw-up I've made. It's very good.
And for those people who like to keep themselves in the illusion that Phil never makes mistakes, then they can just stick to the additional Let's Play Civ 4 series.
Although I make all kinds of mistakes in those games, I just get away with it because it's immortal and not deity.
If people want to watch the live stream or just want to get on-demand clips, go to livestream.com/CivIV.
That's correct.
I mean, it is Civ 4, but of course it's spelled out IV, which makes me think of actually having Civ 4 served to you intravenously.
I actually think of it that way too. I mean, the level of addiction is similar, so it works out.
Calling today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659.
That's 301-637-POLY.
In Europe, 44-121-288-7659.
That's 44-121-288-POLY. You can Skype us at the PolyCast.
Or email us at thepolycast@gmail.com.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on PolyCast,
our sibling shows Modcast and Revcast,
or about PolyCast in general,
log on to the series' official website at thepolycast.net.
Right then, everyone, that concludes episode 82 of PolyCast. Closing with us today, we have co-host Daniel Quick.
You're still here.
Makahlua.
Need more caffeine, please.
Lars Domus.
Goodbye.
Ricardo, R. Rolo 1.
Hey, you can call me Ricardo too.
Imran Siddiqui.
I enjoyed every millisecond of it.
And myself, TheMeInTeam. And just remember, everybody, nukes really do solve all of your Civ 4 problems.
Except killing granaries.
I told you, relative to other people's food stores, nukes do.
That is relative, not absolute. But
But that's what matters in Civ. You only get things sooner relative to your opponents, including the victory conditions. It works. This is getting worse and worse. What's our next topic?
That can shoot down missiles, and you can protect good. Essentially, the introduction only you're saying goodbye instead of hello.
Say goodbye, I say hello.
who was singing, please?
That was Mackie.
It's me. Sorry.
Oh well, let's get serious.
Were we serious at any time? What?
I was when I was talking about the Golden Compass armored bears. I really meant it.
And with this we end the 80, well, what the fuck.
Recording Record date
November 14th, 2009.
Civilization 4, Warlords and Beyond the Sword sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright 2009, civilized communication at civcom.net.